September 19, 1940. Warsaw, Poland. A Polish cavalry officer named Witold Pilecki stands on a street corner during a German roundup operation, watching as Gestapo officers and Wehrmacht soldiers herd civilians into trucks bound for an unknown destination. Pilecki is 39 years old, a veteran of the Polish-Soviet War, and a member of the Polish underground resistance. He has spent the last year evading capture, organizing resistance cells, and gathering intelligence on German occupation forces. Today, he's about to do something that every instinct for survival tells him is insane. He's going to let himself be captured. He's going to volunteer to be sent to a place called Auschwitz, a concentration camp that the Germans established 5 months ago in southern Poland. And he's going to do it because someone needs to find out what's really happening there. And Witold Pilecki has decided that someone is him. But this is getting ahead of our story. To understand why Pilecki made this decision, you need to understand what the Polish resistance knew and didn't know about Auschwitz in September 1940, and how that gap in knowledge represented a problem that was literally killing people. The Germans had invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, and by October, the country had ceased to exist as an independent nation, carved up between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union under the terms of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. What followed was a campaign of systematic terror designed to destroy Polish culture and eliminate anyone who might organize resistance. The Germans arrested intellectuals, teachers, priests, military officers, and anyone else they identified as potential leadership. By mid-1940, these arrests were happening at a rate of thousands per month, and most of the people being arrested were being sent to a new facility that had been established in the town of Oswiecim, which the Germans renamed Auschwitz. The Polish underground resistance knew Auschwitz existed. They knew it was a concentration camp. They knew people were being sent there and not coming back. But they didn't know the specific conditions inside the camp, the organizational structure, the number of prisoners, the security procedures, or most importantly, whether it was possible to organize resistance from within. This information gap was more than an intelligence failure. It was a strategic blindness that prevented the resistance from planning rescue operations, supporting prisoners, or even understanding the full scope of what the Germans were doing. Multiple resistance organizations tried to infiltrate agents into Auschwitz through normal channels, bribing guards or forging paperwork. But none of those attempts succeeded because the Germans controlled every aspect of prisoner intake. The only way into Auschwitz was to be arrested and processed as a prisoner, which meant surrendering yourself to a system specifically designed to break and kill you. No intelligence agency in the world would order an agent to take that risk. So Witold Pilecki volunteered. Pilecki was born in 1901 in Olonets, Russia, where his father had been exiled for participation in Polish independence activities. The family returned to Poland in 1918, just as the country regained independence after 123 years of partition. Pilecki joined the Polish army at age 17 and fought in the Polish-Soviet War of 1919 to 1921, where he saw combat that would have broken most teenagers. He learned how to operate behind enemy lines, how to gather intelligence without getting caught, and how to keep functioning when exhaustion and fear told him to quit. After the war, Pilecki married, started a family, and settled into civilian life, running a small estate in eastern Poland. But when World War II began, he immediately rejoined the military and fought in the September campaign that ended with Poland's defeat. Instead of surrendering or fleeing to neutral territory like many Polish officers did, Pilecki stayed in Warsaw and co-founded one of the first resistance organizations in occupied Poland, a group called the Secret Polish Army. By mid-1940, Pilecki was a key figure in Warsaw's underground network, organizing cells, coordinating intelligence gathering, and planning sabotage operations. He was also thinking about Auschwitz. The resistance kept receiving fragmentary reports about the camp, pieces of information that didn't add up to a complete picture. They knew the Germans were using Auschwitz to imprison Polish political prisoners and resistance members. They knew the death rate was high, though they didn't know exactly how high or what was causing it. They knew the camp was heavily guarded and isolated, making external rescue operations nearly impossible. What they needed was someone on the inside who could build an intelligence network, organize resistance cells among the prisoners, and smuggle detailed reports back to Warsaw. Pilecki looked at this problem and concluded that the only solution was infiltration, and the only person he was willing to ask to take that risk was himself. The plan Pilecki developed was simple in concept and terrifying in execution. During German roundups in Warsaw, the Gestapo would cordon off entire streets and arrest every man of military age they found, checking identification papers and hauling away anyone who seemed suspicious or fit the profile of a resistance member. These roundups happened regularly throughout 1940, and everyone arrested during a roundup was processed through Pawiak prison in Warsaw before being sent to concentration camps. Pilecki's plan was to position himself in a location where he would be swept up in a roundup, arrested with a group of ordinary civilians, and processed into the camp system as a regular prisoner rather than an identified resistance member. He told exactly 2 people about his plan: his resistance commander and one trusted friend who would serve as his contact on the outside. He didn't tell his wife because he knew she would try to stop him. On the morning of September 19th, 1940, Pilecki walked to a Warsaw apartment building that was scheduled for a German roundup operation, based on intelligence the resistance had gathered. He positioned himself on the street outside the building, waited for the German soldiers to arrive, and when they began herding civilians into trucks, Pilecki allowed himself to be arrested along with approximately 2,000 other men. He was carrying false identity papers in the name of Tomasz Serafiński, a made-up person with no resistance connections. The Germans processed him through Pawiak prison, where he was beaten, interrogated, and held in a cell with dozens of other prisoners for 2 nights. On September 21st, 1940, Pilecki and 1,705 other prisoners were loaded onto trucks and transported to Auschwitz. The journey took most of the day. When they arrived, the prisoners were forced to strip naked, had their heads shaved, and were tattooed with identification numbers. Pilecki received the number 4859. Then the Germans explained the rules of the camp, which could be summarized as follows: you will work until you die, and if you try to escape, you will be tortured and executed. Auschwitz in 1940 was not yet the industrialized death camp it would become by 1942. It was originally established as a detention center for Polish political prisoners, a place to hold and break anyone the Germans considered a threat to their occupation. But from the moment Pilecki arrived, he understood that this was not a prison in any conventional sense. This was a system designed to destroy human beings through a combination of starvation, exhaustion, disease, and systematic brutality. Prisoners received approximately 300 calories per day while being forced to perform hard labor for 12 to 14 hours. They slept in overcrowded barracks where typhus and dysentery killed dozens every week. The camp was run by a hierarchy of SS guards and prisoner functionaries called kapos, some of whom were more brutal than the SS themselves. Prisoners were beaten for any infraction, real or imagined. Summary executions happened daily. The average life expectancy of a prisoner in Auschwitz during 1940 and 1941 was approximately 3 months. Pilecki needed to survive significantly longer than 3 months if he was going to accomplish his mission, which meant he needed to adapt faster than the camp could break him. He started by focusing on the fundamentals of survival, getting assigned to a work detail that wouldn't kill him through physical exhaustion, avoiding the attention of particularly sadistic capos, finding ways to supplement his starvation rations, and staying alert to opportunities. But survival was only the first step. Pilecki's actual mission was to build an intelligence network and organize resistance among the prisoners, which meant identifying other prisoners who could be trusted, establishing communication channels with the outside world, and gathering information about the camp's operations while avoiding the attention of camp informers who would report any suspicious activity to the SS. Over the next several months, Pilecki accomplished something that the Germans would have considered impossible if they had known it was happening. He identified other Polish resistance members among the prisoners by carefully observing behavior, asking subtle questions, and testing reactions. He organized these prisoners into small cells using classic conspiracy techniques, where each member knew only a few other members and no one knew the full extent of the network. He established a camp radio, built from smuggled parts and hidden in one of the barracks, that allowed the resistance cells to receive news from the outside world. He organized efforts to steal food and medicine from German supplies and distribute them to prisoners who were on the verge of death from starvation or disease. He developed relationships with civilian workers who entered the camp to perform maintenance, some of whom agreed to smuggle messages out of the camp hidden in their clothing. By mid-1941, Pilecki had built a resistance network inside Auschwitz that included approximately 1,000 members organized into cells throughout the camp. This network provided mutual support, shared resources, and maintained morale among prisoners who otherwise would have had no hope. More importantly, Pilecki was sending detailed intelligence reports to the Polish underground in Warsaw, smuggled out of the camp in messages written on scraps of paper, hidden in bread deliveries, or memorized by released prisoners who could carry information verbally. These reports documented everything Pilecki observed about Auschwitz: the number of prisoners, the death rate, the organizational structure, the security procedures, the expansion plans, and beginning in 1942, something that would horrify everyone who read the reports. The Germans were building gas chambers. In early 1942, Auschwitz transformed from a brutal concentration camp into a death factory as part of the Nazi Final Solution program designed to exterminate European Jews. The Germans constructed gas chambers and crematoria specifically designed for mass murder, and they began transporting Jews from across occupied Europe to Auschwitz for immediate execution. Pilecki witnessed this transformation and documented it in reports that became some of the earliest detailed accounts of the Holocaust reaching the outside world. He described the arrival of transport trains carrying thousands of Jews, the selection process on the ramp where SS doctors decided who would be sent to the gas chambers immediately and who would be worked to death in the camp, and the systematic murder of men, women, and children on a scale that defied comprehension. Pilecki's reports were smuggled out of Auschwitz and forwarded through resistance channels to the Polish government in exile in London, which passed them on to Allied governments. These reports reached British and American officials in 1942 and 1943, providing documented evidence of Nazi atrocities at a time when many Western leaders were still skeptical about the scope of German crimes. But despite the intelligence Pilecki was providing, despite the resistance network he had built, and despite his hope that the Allies would authorize some kind of military intervention to liberate or at least disrupt Auschwitz, no intervention came. The Allies declined to bomb the gas chambers or the rail lines leading to the camp, citing operational difficulties and other strategic priorities. And Pilecki realized that if he stayed in Auschwitz much longer, he would die there, either from disease, malnutrition, or being discovered by the SS. On the night of April 26, 1943, after 2 years and 7 months as prisoner number 4859, Witold Pilecki escaped from Auschwitz. The escape was not spontaneous. Pilecki had been planning it for months, working with a small group of trusted prisoners to identify weaknesses in camp security and waiting for the right opportunity. That opportunity came when Pilecki's work detail was assigned to a night shift at a camp bakery located near the perimeter fence. The bakery was outside the main camp area, separated from the guard towers by approximately 100 yards of open ground. Pilecki and two other prisoners, Stanisław Gustav Jaster and Jan Redzai, volunteered for the night shift on April 26th. At approximately midnight, during a shift change when guard coverage was at its thinnest, the three men overpowered a capo, cut the telephone lines to prevent an immediate alarm, forced open a metal door using tools they had smuggled from the bakery, and ran into the darkness beyond the fence. They ran for approximately 7 miles through the Polish countryside, expecting at any moment to hear dogs and sirens behind them. But the alarm wasn't raised until morning roll call, when the Germans discovered the 3 prisoners were missing. By that time, Pilecki and his companions had reached a safe house operated by the resistance. And within 3 days, Pilecki was back in Warsaw, providing his resistance commanders with a detailed verbal debriefing about everything he had witnessed inside Auschwitz. Pilecki compiled his experiences into a comprehensive report titled Witold's Report, a document that ran over 100 pages and provided the most detailed account of Auschwitz operations that Allied intelligence had received up to that point. The report described the camp's layout, the SS command structure, the prisoner population, the death toll, the gas chambers, and the systematic extermination of Jews that was accelerating throughout 1943. Pilecki also reported on the resistance network he had established, which continued to operate after his escape and provided ongoing intelligence about camp operations. After delivering his report, Pilecki returned to active resistance work. He participated in the Warsaw Uprising of August 1944, a 63-day battle in which Polish resistance forces attempted to liberate Warsaw from German occupation. The uprising was crushed by overwhelming German force, and Pilecki was captured and sent to a German prisoner of war camp, where he remained until the end of the war. He survived the war, but his survival was temporary. When the Soviet Union established communist control over Poland after 1945, Pilecki was arrested by the Soviet-controlled Polish secret police in 1947, charged with espionage for the Polish government in exile, tortured, subjected to a show trial, and executed by firing squad on May 25, 1948. He was 47 years old. The communist government buried him in an unmarked grave and classified his Auschwitz infiltration as capitalist propaganda. For the next 41 years, Witold Pilecki was erased from Polish history, his name removed from officials, records, his report suppressed, and his family harassed by state security services. It wasn't until the fall of communism in 1989 that Pilecki's story began to re-emerge. His Auschwitz reports were declassified and published. Survivors of the camp resistance network he had organized came forward to testify about his leadership. In 2006, the Polish government posthumously awarded Pilecki the Order of the White Eagle, Poland's highest decoration. And in 2013, he was posthumously promoted to the rank of colonel. Today, Witold Pilecki is recognized as one of the most remarkable figures of World War II. A man who voluntarily entered hell because someone needed to document what was happening there, and no one else would take the risk. The Germans never fully understood what Pilecki had accomplished inside Auschwitz. They knew prisoner number 4859 had escaped, and they knew there had been some form of prisoner organization in the camp, but they never connected those facts to realize that a Polish intelligence officer had spent 2.5 years living among them, building a resistance network under their noses and sending detailed reports to the outside world. If they had understood the scope of Pilecki's operation, the security response would have been immediate and devastating. But by the time the Germans realized what had happened, Pilecki was gone. His network was operational, and the intelligence he had gathered was already in the hands of Allied governments. Whether those governments did enough with that intelligence is a question that historians still debate. But there's no debate about Pilecki's courage or the extraordinary nature of what he accomplished. He walked into Auschwitz by choice, survived conditions designed to kill him, organized resistance among broken prisoners, documented genocide while living inside the death machine, and escaped to tell the world what he had seen. And then, after the war, his own countrymen executed him for doing it.